All right, guys. So we are continuing our study on things that really shape God's people. It might be traditions, it might be teachings, it might be struggles that the early church really kind of faced. And one of those is specifically what Jesus addresses in our passage for tonight. So, Mark 12, verses 38 through 44. This is kind of a continuation of what Matthew started in Matthew 23 that we dealt with last week. So, Matthew 23, as he starts addressing the Pharisees, he talks about how they're putting on pretenses, how they're doing everything to be seen as more religious. They wear the right clothes. They act a certain way. They want the recognition and the respect that comes with being seen as more godly. Mark adds some more to it, so, another level to it, and then Jesus gives us this example of the widow, and really kind of brings home the whole teaching for us. To think about this lesson, have you ever been a part of a congregation when they started really talking about money? Uh, it's not something we do a whole lot here. I mean, in the time I've been here, maybe 4 or 5 times at most. I always feel like talking about money is one of those things that's needed, um, but you've got to be careful with it because it can easily become we're greedy, we want more money, give me more, more, more. It really is. He talked about money and how you manage those things in relation to money, probably more than about anything else, because it really does have the biggest impact on us. Every church has that season where they really have to talk about money. It might be a building fund or a mission trip or a family's house who that burned down and they need help getting back on their feet. And inevitably, as this happens, when somebody gets up and starts talking about the money, we all kind of start doing the math in our heads. You know, we start looking at the board and say, okay, uh, the math is not mathing so well. But when that happens, uh, we also notice something else. For those who've given a lot of money, there's a little flicker. And what I mean is, even though you don't say it out loud, even though you probably wouldn't want it said out loud, there's always this little flicker of, well, I gave a lot. I'm really helping a lot. Or there could be the exact opposite kind of flicker. You ever had that happen before? This is the one I've struggled with the most, the opposite effect. I've never been the person who could give a lot of money, but I've been the guy that could really struggle to give any money whatsoever, and I always felt kind of guilty about it. When those kind of events happen and we're talking about money or the budget or what needs to be done, we can deal with those kind of struggles, either a little bit of pride about how much we gave or some guilt and shame about how little we gave. I've even known some people who talked themselves out of giving entirely because what they could do was so small. They didn't feel like it was worth anything, which is a really horrible place to be. Anything we give to the Lord matters, uh, especially when it's an act of the heart. When it's an act of worship, it matters. So last week, Jesus exposed these men who wanted to be seen for their piety, their titles, their clothing, that they were more holy, godly than everyone else. Now Jesus takes us a little bit further. In fact, he's still in the temple. And he takes a little bit further stroll into the temple. And what he says kind of turns our whole way of measuring generosity upside down. So we're going to spend in this class, we're going to spend our time with two questions. What does it look like when religion becomes a cover for taking advantage of people? And what does God actually count as fortune? So let's start here at verse 38. Somebody read that for us, verses 38 and 39.
And in his teaching, he said, beware of the scribes who like to go about in long robes and to have salutations in the marketplaces and the best seats in the synagogues and the places of honor at the feast.
All right, so we kind of covered this last week with Matthew 23, verses 5 and following. But Mark's version of this is shorter, and it lands with a little different weight to it. Because Jesus kind of starts with familiar territory. He says, beware of those people who are wearing religion as the facade. We've all seen those people, right? For Jesus, it was these long robes, fringes, tassels, phylacteries. There was this constant effort to appear more holy, to make people think you were better than you actually were. It might be where you sat in public settings, but especially in the synagogue, the leaders always sat up front in their own special chairs where everybody had to look at the leaders. And they had, all the attention, all the focus, the best seat in the house, the place of honor, every time, everywhere they went. The same hunger to be seen, the same performance dressed up as devotion. It's a real struggle. Now, just off the top of our heads, if we ask the question, do we struggle with that kind of stuff today? How would you answer that question? Absolutely. Hmm. Their lifestyle proves something totally different, doesn't it? And that's true of a lot of us. But even as conservative Christians, we still struggle with things like that. And I'll give you an example how a person dresses in church. What was that? How people dress in church. So when I went to preaching school in the early 2000s, yeah, it's been that long ago. We were not allowed to stand up and speak in school or at any church unless you had a suit and tie on. You had to have a suit and tie, jacket, tie, the whole 9 yards, or you weren't allowed to speak. And it became this standard of if you're not dressed a certain way, if you don't look a certain way, then you're not as godly as everyone else. And if we're being honest, we see that in a lot of churches. We might even struggle with it ourselves to some degree. I noticed when I came over here, I was walking up the aisle and I'm like, I wore my ratty old shoes that I just used to walk around the house to church tonight. I didn't even change shoes.
And we're offended.
It was like, for a moment, it kind of bothered me. I'm like, what are people going to think? I'm wearing these ratty old shoes that I just wear around the house. But
Makes you more approachable. I mean, and it's like you were saying, the way people dress reflect their personality, their lack of humility.
mm,
I mean, not if you want to be, you do want to be presentable, but you want to head back for the time. I mean, just common sense stuff.
yeah. See, and I think that discussion kind of brings up the honesty of this whole performance thing. Because the cost of a performance, how people see you, is, whether we like it or not, something we struggle with. It was true in Jesus' day when, the majority of people wore, sandals and, for lack of a better term, dresses. Jeans weren't really a thing then.
And starting about walking on the carpet, and we're even coming in the building about it, just tell them, as long as you're basically dressed, there's no reason not to come.
When we were in Kentucky, the majority of the group were farmers, whether it be cattle, whether it be corn or soybeans. Corn and soybeans was a big thing, and cattle. There was times they'd come in, they'd be covered in mud. I mean, they'd smell sometimes. I mean, you just couldn't help it. It was either come to church looking like that and smelling like that, or don't come at all. And they would choose to come, and I was always appreciative of that. But the truth is those kinds of things bother us. It bothers us if we're the one that can't dress as well as everybody else. It bothers us if we feel like someone that's dressed better than us or has more money than us, if we feel like they're looking down on us. Even during Jesus' time, this was a problem because they spent a lot of time with this. They spent a lot of time trying to make sure everybody saw them as, I'm going to use our term, Christian. Think about that. How many times in your life as a Christian have you been concerned with what other people would think was Christian or not? What looked Christian? Yeah. And
Like the only place I can find in the New Testament where any of those even addresses, it also is dressed down.
yeah.
Don't wear your jewelry, don't wear your gold and everything you get to. Don't make anybody else think.
Mhm.
So we know better,
Yeah. And guys, that's the thing is, it is part of our culture and how we were raised. But it's always this tension. I couldn't tell you how many times I've had somebody this year tell me I can't come to church, I don't have the right clothes. To this church. And I'm like, listen, once you see this church, you'll know that we don't, I mean, we don't care. You might have somebody in a suit and tie, and you might have somebody in shorts and flip flops. We really don't distinguish between what looks godly and what doesn't. Well, then Mark takes us a little bit further. See, Matthew dealt with this too. But Mark takes it even further in verse 40. So somebody read verse 40 for us.
Which devour widows' houses for a pretense, make long prayers, these shall receive greater damnation.
Devour widows' houses. What does that mean?
Person says that they cheat widows out of their long prayers just to show.
Devour or cheat people out of their homes, cheat people out of their inheritances.
So I'm not paying your debt, get your money and debt. That people just live with that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So this has went past vanity. This has went past hypocrisy and why I'm doing things to what?
So I know my mother had a friend who didn't go to James School. There were three of them in the same home. They couldn't build those homes. They're still together.
And that's probably a very different scenario than what we're talking about here. But the idea, and I wrote in my notes, exploitation.
Widows couldn't get a whole lot of power back there, did they?
They did not. They really were just one line between them, or one degree of separation between them and total ruin, being homeless. So a widow in that world had almost no standing in that world. No husband, often no son, no legal standing, no safety net. The only thing they really had to appeal to was the mercy of the people around them, their neighbors, their friends, those with some authority. But it was also a really common thing then, and we have something very similar today where um, anytime someone was struggling then, they would go to their religious leaders for advice, whether it was how to manage their home, how to manage their inheritance, how to pay their bills. It was a very human struggle. I'm not going to be able to do it. And they go to the religious leaders looking for advice on how to deal with this stuff. These men were trusted to help, to give good advice, to help them manage their estates. And then they were taking advantage of that trust, giving advice that would benefit them, or helping, convincing them to make decisions that would put that property in their name. Marty?
Wasn't that that was the case? You look at the she wasn't not it's probably basically in places in this world.
Yeah, absolutely. So when Jesus gets to this point, I think it's a really human side of how religion can become harmful, how church can be used to damage people, take advantage of people, and to just, for the wrong people, be used as a way to get more. And they covered it up, Jesus says, with long prayers and seeming more holy. So to everyone around them, they thought, wow, these are great men. These are great leaders. They're doing the very best they can for us. But behind the scenes, what was happening?
That's why Jesus said they will get their reward, or they're getting their reward.
Yeah. So, this is exploitation. This is abuse. This is taking that position of leadership, of authority, of power, and using it to hurt others. So last week, the danger is pride. It's arrogance. It's hypocrisy, wanting to be noticed, wanting that seat of honor. And that's serious. I mean, that really gets to the core of why we do things. What's the problem here?
They won't be seen.
Greed, pride, wanting to. Unchecked pride eventually does what? Say that again.
Turning the unchecked power.
Unchecked power, because that's usually what happens is it becomes power. So given enough time and power and a willingness to use people, because their faith, their religion is not really legitimate, they use it to hurt people. Mm-hmm.
They're looking for something. They trust.
Mm-hmm.
They see these leaders and they believe on who they are, in the position they're in. I can trust that person. So we got to the priest and all the so-called preacher,
Mm-hmm.
You see, this was amazing. wonder why Jesus had the power and the crowds he had, because he was telling them what they would say in their lives. But he was exposing them.
He was exposing
He
it,
said,
yeah.
God doesn't want this. This is not good.
Yeah. And I read an article just right before I came to church about this very same thing. It was a church that had been a preacher, or should I say a pastor, is what they called him, that was using the church and their ministry to exploit money from people. People who couldn't pay their own bills were giving everything they had to this group. People were selling their homes, selling their land, deeding over their stuff to try to give this church more and more and more and more. And this guy's sitting in $1 million home, buying $1 million planes and stuff, and people are going homeless over it. What's scary is it's always been a problem. And it's not a modern problem. As long as there's been religion, there's been those people who would willingly use religion for their own needs, for their own ways of doing things. And like Jeff said, Jesus says they will receive the greater condemnation. Why is that true?
Well, it goes to the condition of the heart. Yeah, I mean, it's like teachers and holders, are going to get you out kids, not harshly, but they're going to have,
Stricter.
yeah, with a microscope.
God's message.
Yeah. It's in Galatians, and throughout scripture, the idea is taught, if you put a little in, you get a little out. If you put a lot in, you get a little out, sowing and reaping. But there's also, if you've been entrusted with a little, then God will expect a little. The parable of the talents, Matthew 25. If he's entrusted you with a lot, he expects more from you because you are talented enough to use that, whatever that might be. But when God entrusts you with more, and then you use that to hurt people to your own advantage, Jesus says that's going to be judged even more strictly, not because of the condition of your heart as much as it is the other side of it. Because this is not a victimless crime. And I think that's probably the best way to put it. These guys are going to be judged more strictly. They're going to get a greater condemnation because they're hurting people.
I can say too about children. Children really trust, they do their thing, and if you take that trust and destroy it, whatever way, God's going to do it.
Mhm.
And I think it's the same way with leaders who abuse the people who are putting trust in. And they
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And here's where I want to kind of make it even more applicable for all of us. Most of us are not asked to manage someone else's home, their estates, their inheritances. Most of us don't have that, Jerry Falwell kind of influence where, major universities have been started. And, I would contend a lot of good's been done in this guy's name and what he tried to accomplish, but he was anything but. He had a lot of really major flaws. And I don't think any of it was genuine in the sense of, he just wanted to help people. I think there was an ulterior motive to a lot of what he did. Mhm. Yeah, bankers. Oh, Jim. Tammy Faye. That has become the epitome of extreme makeup, huh? Tammy Faye. We see that every once in a while. Yeah, it true. This is way off topic. No, maybe I just won't go there. We won't go there. Most of us don't have those positions those positions of trust or power. But that doesn't mean we don't have some measure of trust, some position of influence or authority, someone in our lives that we exert more power over them, more influence. Would it be, grandchildren? Would it be nieces and nephews, children, cousins? There's always someone in our life. It might be a parent with a child, an employer with an employee, a leader in the church, but it might be in your job or with those people who know your history and the kind of work you did and look up to your advice. Most of us have some semblance of influence, power, authority. And the question that this puts before us isn't, would you ever really rob someone outright? Would you ever really steal someone's house? That's the big question, right? That's kind of the context Jesus puts it under. But the question for us is more along the lines of, would I ever let my own needs or desires hurt someone else? Not accidentally, because I think we have to be careful here. Does intention matter in this discussion?
Yeah.
I think our intentions matter for us, but does it lessen the effect? It does not. So where have we seen positions of trust or influence or whatever been used in ways that ended up hurting people?
Well, it's just going to look at Congress. And I don't want to get political, but just the billions upon billions of wasted dollars that were entrusted to it. The French Revolution had a guillotine for a reason.
Yeah.
Like you said, cause and effect is undefeated so far, We have to be careful, and it's like people use these time, they pretty much, I'm sure, a pretty good amount of them talk with the Pharisees and more religious structure is a joke. And you look at the politicians now, I try to respect the spirit of preachers, but they're shows. Yes.
And, guys, the challenge is, is really, would we allow what we want, our desires, our needs, even our legitimate needs, motivate us to do something a little less than ethical? Would we allow that to cause us to hurt someone else, even if it's accidental? That really is, in my opinion, the challenge of this. These guys were being very intentional about it. They were using religion as a pretense or a facade to get. So they approached religion from the aspect of what can I get from it? Jesus presented faith as a very different thing. And he presented it as a giver. What can I give? What can I do for someone else? How can I improve their life? How can I make things better for them? Even if it in the moment hurts me, even if it requires of me more than I want to give, what can I do to help to improve other people's lives? And that was the contrast, because that's what Jesus saw in his time, and it's what we still struggle with, right? Even those people who had good intentions, if they were not careful, can allow their positions to become an avenue that other people are hurt from. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So the challenge in all of this for us is, and me and Nona were talking about this a little bit before class. I spent a whole day thinking about just this one question. Would I allow that to be a problem? And and here's where it gets even worse is, we start thinking about the question, would I do that intentionally? I think most of us could say, no, I wouldn't intentionally try to harm someone else. I wouldn't intentionally try to take something from someone else or harm them in any way. But then the question becomes, have I done that even though it wasn't intentional? Yeah.
Two plants, you better let it eat you alive to fix the problem. Because it can just get easy most times.
I'll give you an example. This is one from my own personal experience, especially early in the faith. I was very zealous, very eager. I wanted everybody in my family, especially, to know about the church, the truth of Scripture, how to be saved. And I was plagued with one really big problem. I didn't know that much. I had a whole lot of zeal and not very much knowledge. When you have a whole lot of zeal and not much knowledge, you end up hurting people. And that's what happened. My intention was, I want to see these people saved. But what was the result? More often than not, it was they wouldn't even talk to me anymore. And it happened on several occasions. I've said that I burned bridges that I'm still trying to build back, 30 years later. It wasn't that it was intentional. I had the best of intentions. But in the process, I allowed it to become something that it wasn't meant to be. It was, one of my teachers used to say, when you don't have a good answer, all you're left with is a bad one. I mean, it's kind of obvious, but he would, especially related to religion, he'd say, when you're trying to really debate someone, teach someone, and they ask a question you can't answer, what happens? Well, the first time it's like, wow, okay, it kind of puts you back on your heels a little bit. You don't know how to handle that. But it happens often enough with the same person. Eventually, you start getting defensive, and you start getting a little mean. Not intentionally, of course, but it happens. You start getting defensive and a little mean, and you start pushing points that you wouldn't normally say. And in the process, people get hurt. One of the things I used to hear all the time was, if someone's house was on fire, would you go in and rescue them? Well, everybody's answer is always, well, of course I would. The question is, does the person know their house is on fire? Because if they don't, all they're seeing is assault. All they see is you're rushing into their house trying to drag them out. And they're not going to take that very well. They're going to resist. They're going to fight. It's going to cause a lot of damage. All that time spent trying to help people, to teach them the truth, to really help them become Christians. And because I didn't approach it the right way, created a lot of damage. And I still feel guilty about it. It still bothers me. And it's still one of those things that I ask myself, would I allow myself to go there again?
You knock on the door first.
Knock on the door first.
That person who doesn't even teach you. And these people are Jesus. These people will never feel guilty about what they do.
Mm-hmm.
They would never even think about apologizing for what they did. Because they built themselves up so high that their decisions are right up there with God.
Mm-hmm.
And so, whereas when we do something, and we find out that we've hurt somebody, never meant to do it. Like you said, we're going to do anything to correct the situation.
And that makes the difference, I think. So I tried to think of the best way to kind of put this into practice. The test isn't really intentionality. Intentionality matters. Scripture says God knows the heart. He knows what you intended to do, but does that change the damage? See, at the end of the day, the question really is whether that vulnerable person walked away damaged or with less because of my actions.
Unfortunately, you're gonna offend somebody.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's inevitable. That's why, the word tact is so important.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, you just gotta remember that those people probably believe as strong as you,
Mm-hmm.
that they're right.
Absolutely.
And that causes major impact where you're gonna end up agreeing to listen to.
Well, and one thing to remember, guys, is just because the situation has the potential to work out really badly doesn't excuse us from the responsibility to deal with it. Like the house that's on fire, just because they don't know doesn't excuse us from standing in the street and watch the house burn down. We still have a responsibility to do something. As Christians, when someone's believing a lie and their souls are on the line, we have a responsibility to deal with that, to try to teach them, to try to help. But Jesus puts on us that added responsibility of you can't just do this any way you want to. You can't just say whatever you want. You can't just act however you want. If they walk away damaged because of your good intention, then they're just damaged. Marty?
Something to that, even if you offend somebody, they're good and see. But they need to realize that we have done well, and God will give you this. So you never, sometimes it may be offensive at first, well, remember your words. Take it around.
Yeah. But still, intentional or not, our actions can hurt people badly, especially in religion and in faith. And we still have to try, but we have to consider where I'm at, what I'm doing, how I'm approaching this, because who I am matters as much as who they are. If all I see is them and their problem, their struggle, their issue, then I'm losing sight of me. And if I lose sight of me in the process and my responsibility to Christ, then I don't think about how my actions will damage them, how it will hurt them. And the old analogy of hit someone with the Bible. We've used religion as a weapon, and we've hurt people. We've used good intentions. We've used things like, "But I'm just telling the truth." I've heard that in church so many times in my lifetime that it's just ridiculous. Jesus says, "Listen, greater condemnation. If what you're doing hurts people, you're responsible for that. The damage you cause, you're responsible for that. Even if you say, listen, I had the best of intentions, you're still responsible for that. It's still sin. How you acted, not just what they're doing. Like, let's take addressing a homosexual couple. I mean, we're all pretty likely to encounter that scenario, right? A friend or family member who is now come out as homosexual. How you address them, how you treat them, how you interact with them, even how you try to help them, it's very tenuous. If you hurt them in the process, that matters.
You've got to show humility. There's the church.
Mm.
You have to be able to show up and back to it.
Yeah. Because, does God want us to confront error? Absolutely, he does. Does he want us to speak the truth? Absolutely, but he wants us to do it in love with the right motivations. He wants people to walk away better, not worse. And if we're not careful, people will walk away worse than they were before.
How do we?
It can, absolutely. And I think the challenge is not to let it cause us to freeze and not do anything. We're still going to have to do what's right. We're still going to have to address situations that are harmful and that there's potential for things to go badly. So we got to really consider and pray about our intentions, how we're going to address this, how we're going to bring these things up. Because there's a lot on the line. Greater condemnation is on the line. Norman?
But I think that's central too. But how do you get through to them? I mean, it's like we're just supposed to accept it and say, okay, that's fine, no big deal. But it's just like if somebody else commits a murder, it is a big deal. It's wrong. So how do you do that with in today's society? You know, you're looked at as like you're a, I don't know what the word I'm looking for, but like you're a bigot or whatever, but you know, it's just like somebody shacks up with somebody, doesn't it? You know, so
How do you address it?
yeah, how do you do that without?
I'm going to oversimplify it, and I'm going to say it in a way that really doesn't help a whole lot. You do it in a Christian way. And what I mean by that is, and hopefully this is how it helps make a little more sense, is, you know, how did Jesus Christ deal with sinners? How did he interact with them? So he still loved people and he still treated people well. He didn't shy away from telling them the truth. He didn't shy away from challenging them. The woman caught in adultery, how did Jesus deal with her? With grace and humility, but he still told her, go and sin no more. He didn't excuse the sin and he didn't let it go, but he didn't treat her like somehow less than a person in the process. And that's how we deal with it. You know, let's say this person has come out as homosexual. How do you treat them? Treat them with love and respect, the same way you would have treated them before. You're still going to have to say and speak the truth, and you can't just be passive and say, "Well, you know, that's fine, everything's okay, it doesn't matter," because it does matter. It is a big deal. But you've got to be careful how you approach this. And I say, this is my opinion. You earn the right to speak the truth to people. You don't have the right to just say whatever you want to say to anyone. You never have, you never will. I get frustrated all the time with people who assume they have the right to say whatever they want. And all it comes across as is judgmental and harsh, uncaring. It doesn't matter if what they're saying is true or not. They just think they automatically have a right to say whatever they want to say. We don't have that. We all are to some degree. But once you build a relationship with someone and you're close enough with someone, then you're close enough you can say, listen, you're acting stupid. You can't say that to just anyone. Quit being an idiot. You know, I've had people tell me that before. It's okay. Sometimes it's needed. Sometimes you need somebody to say, quit being an idiot. But not just anyone can say that. Not everyone has the right or the avenue to say those things. The same thing with addressing sin in someone else's life, whether it be homosexuality, whether it be adultery, whatever it is. You don't just have the right to say something. You have to build that relationship, earn that right. And then once you have, then they'll open that door to you.
Religious people walked by him. They wanted to cure on. And then the Samaritan came and helped him. You know that had an impact on that Jewish man or somebody, you know, that was a Gentile come out and use his money, you know, to pay for his fear. A lot of times when you try to be good to somebody, and we have homosexuality
in our family. And, you still love them, and they know how you feel. I mean, they know that you're against that. They already know that. But you have to, um, at least show them that you love them, you know.
Absolutely. I would contend, and not picking on what you said or anything, really not. That sometimes we've got to be careful that we're not just trying to show somebody that we're Christian and show them that we love them. We got to genuinely care about these people. If you genuinely care about someone and you genuinely make an effort to build that relationship where you have that opportunity to say what needs to be said, they'll see that and they'll be open to it. But they also see if you're being disingenuous. They'll pick up on it really quickly. We all do. When someone is pretending to be something, they're not. When someone's pretending to care, when they don't really, we see that. It's really evident. Sometimes we're a little more blinded to it than at other times, but most of the time we see it pretty quickly. People are pretty astute at picking up on things like that. Absolutely.
We need out of the equation and put God's word in there. Like I might not, and I would say I don't understand some of this, but this is God's word. This is what God has said in His scriptures, and I firmly believe that I have to follow this scripture. And that's not my opinion. It's not,
No.
I'm not degrading you or anything. I'm just telling you this is what I live.
Yeah.
Right, you know, from all the way through.
Well, it's not so simple, is it? And that's what makes Christianity hard. If we could just approach this as a hard, fast do and do not, thou shalt not, thou shalt do, then it's really easy because we don't have to think, we don't have to feel, we don't have to deal with anyone else's or care about anyone else's thoughts and feelings and how they walk away from the exchange. But in Christianity, we do care. Christ cares. That's why, the golden rule is do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. And the point is act first. Be the bigger person. Be the better person. Treat them well, even when they're not treating you well. Because what's our first instinct? When someone is trying to force their ideas and beliefs on us, how do we respond? We get defensive, yeah. I really appreciate how you said that because I hadn't considered it that way, but I think that's a really valid point. A lot of times people are just looking for a fight. Most people that are what they call themselves atheists. Most atheists today are not really atheists. They're believers that have been hurt and damaged by religion or expectations or whatever it might be, and they're angry. So I would contend they're more agnostic than atheist. They kind of know there's a God and they kind of believe it. They're just hurt by everything in life, the different scenarios. So they're angry. And when they exchange with you, when they talk to you, they're angry. And that's how they're going to come across as I'm hurt, I'm damaged, and I want to make sure you know it. It's your fault. It's God's fault. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
When He told him we need to forgive, he definitely did not like where Jesus was standing.
Mm-hmm.
He turned and left, and Jesus went down. If we stand up for what God has said, we're going to be.
And we can't be responsible for the fact that, okay, I had the best of intentions and I handled it the very best way possible. They're just angry and they're going to be mad no matter what I say. You can't prevent that. Sometimes it's going to happen. The God will hold you accountable for how you deal with this. These guys were doing it intentionally. You know, they didn't care about anyone else or how they were affected by it. All they cared about was, what can I get out of this? What can make me look better? How do I maintain the status quo? But for us, Jesus says, listen, what you do matters. How you interact with people matters. Even when you're trying to speak the truth and do the best thing possible for people, what you do matters. And if they walk away damaged because of your best intentions or your best efforts, then overall it's still a failure on your part.
Did James mention that the tongue is about the worst weapon of death?
Absolutely.
It wasn't James.
Yeah. James, actually, I would contend the whole book of James really kind of deals with some of the bigger struggles we have, like keeping our mouth shut and not saying things we shouldn't be saying.
Be right. Shut up.
Yeah. I had an elder tell me one time that he said, every good preacher ought to know when to stand up, speak up, shut up, and sit down.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, yeah, I get it. I can totally see that. But I think that applies to faith. You know, we need to know when to speak up, stand up, speak up. We also need to know when this is not going well, and I need to stop it before it goes any further and people get hurt in the process. Because
All he does is the
really,
Holy Spirit to control my thoughts, my mind, and control my tongue.
yeah. But, you know, and while there's a real legitimacy to what you're saying, there's also, I'm responsible to control my own tongue. You know, I'm responsible for my behavior and my actions. No one else can control how I act, and I can't control anyone else's actions, but I
No,
can
but God
control
can
mine.
sure help me to control it.
Absolutely, God can help us, and I think we need that. We need to be praying for His leadership and guidance, and to protect us. You know, I believe Jesus said it as, you know, lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. You know, there's a certain aspect to this that only God can really help you. The fruit of the Spirit is something only the Spirit can really make in us, but we still got to be making an effort. We still got to be trying, because what we do matters. Absolutely. Mhm. And sometimes the answer is, you know, love them, build that relationship.
Yes, to see.
And sometimes it's move on. You've done all you can, and any attempts to do more is just going to create more hurt or damage or waste your time. Jesus says, and this is one I always think about, do not cast your pearls before swine. Don't force it, because there comes a point of diminishing return here where it's just making things worse for everybody involved, you included. Sometimes it's time to move on.
Timeline between finding the hands and coming forward.
Mhm. Absolutely. And that's what makes Christianity so challenging. Because when you bring the heart and mind into play here, the emotions and everybody else's heart, mind, and emotions, then how we approach things is difficult. And every scenario is going to be different. You might face the very same scenario with 5 different people, and it'd be very different every time. You've got to move slowly. You've got to move with wisdom and the Holy Spirit. Uh, but you still have to move. Any other questions or comments before we end? Okay.
You probably say you're not just starting research, but Rebecca Russell, which is mother's first cousin, she's 97. She's in hospice, you know. So, she's just, you know.
Mm. So Rabina Russell, that was
Rebecca Russell, that was my mother's first cousin of an 18 months.
okay. Anyone else? Any questions or comments on our subject for tonight?
One thing, problem person by the I cannot get that out of my mouth. I cannot. Huh? Yeah, it's just to make it goes instead of them.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How about them and they?
Yes.
That's not even proper grammar. I mean, that's not even style. You cannot say
Specifically, mathematically, and then.
All right, I totally pushed us down a rabbit hole on that one, didn't I?
How to talk to them without using those terms.
Mhm.
Or
Because you still have a responsibility to be loving and kind to these people, but you also have a responsibility to not lie to them either. Sometimes you tell the truth. So, I mean, there's a balance here. It's hard. That's why Jesus says greater condemnation is on the line.
And then, you know, the old saying,
I missed something because I heard Veronica start laughing. So, all right, we're going to stop right there. Go
the
ahead,
old
Kathy.
saying, yeah, the old saying, you know, let's agree to disagree. But it doesn't really, you know, sometimes it doesn't help. Because you really,
Yeah. You never know what people are going to be saying here sometimes. It's like sometimes you hear something, you're like, I'm just not even going to go there. All right, guys, thank you so much for your time and attention. We're going to stop right there. We did go over for a bit, but hopefully it was a good discussion. Hopefully it helped us think about how these scriptures apply in a very real way for us.